Thank you, President Gary. Fellow Rotarians and honored guests, our speaker today will be addressing Rotary's sixth area of focus, growing local economies. On behalf of Paul Gray, who is out of town today, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Mayor Seth Fleetwood. Mayor Fleetwood began his term as our city mayor on January 1st, 2020, and brings 25 years of community activism and experience, including serving as a private practice attorney since 1995. He has served 2 terms as a council member on both the Whatcom County Council and the Bellingham City Council. He is a purpose-driven advocate for public interest with a commitment to continual progress through thoughtful collaboration and compassionate leadership. He has dedicated the past couple of decades to ensuring that Bellingham is a more affordable, cleaner, and economically prosperous city. Seth, welcome to the Rotary Club of Bellingham, and we look forward to hearing your reflections in your first year as mayor. You have the floor.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Rotarians. I'm looking at this, seeing all these names I recognize. There's Pete Kremen. I don't know if that's his screenshot or an actual picture, but Pete, I haven't seen you in ages. I learned all kinds of, Pete doesn't know this, but I learned all kinds of tricks of the trade from good old Pete Kremen. It's nice to see you, Pete. It's been a long time. My mom's on, and my sister's an actress, and she often says when she has a performance that she doesn't really get nervous unless family and friends are on. And so mom's presence is making me a little bit nervous. I don't know how she got onto a Rotary call, but she figured out some way to do it. Congrats to Ward. They really throw the love on you in this organization. That's pretty cool. You're fortunate. Thanks for this opportunity to share some thoughts in this year that I don't think any of us anticipated. When this year started for me, I was envisioning that it was going to be, at least as far as the economy goes, sort of a status quo, continued with a little bit of reliable economic growth. And I thought that we'd be working on lots of issues that were very prominent in the campaign, all the issues that we're so familiar with, how to accommodate a growing population, how to create home affordability, to name just a couple. And then of course, sidetracked. I recall so well, I think it was December 31st when the press release went out from China sort of officially announcing that there was this virus, and it became very prominent sort of from the very first day of my term, which was January 1st. So there was this looming presence and growing specter of an impending pandemic sort of from the very get-go. I never really had an opportunity to experience a normal other than this year. So this has been an interesting year to experience my one and only normal, but it's been intense and challenging on so many fronts. As it relates to the pandemic, it was in March, I believe, early March, I'll say March 12th, when I declared the first emergency declaration, invoking my emergency powers as mayor that allow a whole series of things to happen at a much quicker rate than they otherwise would, for better or for worse. In fact, I think I invoked it. I wanted to wait on invoking it until there was some compelling need. The need was the growing awareness that we needed to move the walk-in center. And I know that's been controversial, but we cited the new base camp, the walk-in center, because as you'll recall, Bellingham High School had housed that homeless facility for people, and they needed to move to that location quickly. So that was sort of the first sort of official action. that was responsive to COVID. Of course, the city has had to adjust quickly. We pretty much the entire city staff, I would say, sort of leapt into a new emergency response. All kinds of systems having to change. We went to remote, as all of you did, or many of you did as well, I suspect. It created a requirement for our IT department to do all kinds of additional work that wasn't imagined, relating to just getting equipment so that our staff could work remotely. I've heard all of our department heads at the City of Bellingham point out that their experience this year is unlike anything they've ever experienced. 10 times more work. The IT director said the service requests have gone up by about 100%. Our city attorney has said that their increase in work volume has gone up. Everyone can go through. Our communications director indicated that she's put out more press releases in the last 6 months than in the last 20 years combined. So everyone's just been working really, really hard. And it's been an honor to be associated with a really great, competent, highly professional staff committed to doing the good work of delivering essential public services that all of us need living in this community. Of course, one of the major successes was joining with a number of community jurisdictional partners in putting up a Whatcom Unified Command to respond to the emergency that we've been in. I think it's probably fair to say that at least in the spring, so many of the things that we anticipated working on were sort of put on the back burner. It was full-on emergency response in every meaningful respect in March and April, in May, and we got through that really intense period where the curve was just going up steep. It's been well-staffed, and I continue to have weekly meetings with that group, and they continue to do a good job. All sorts of directives that have come out of the city and the county relating to expectations around conduct and use of masks, lots of directives about expectations on our public trails. We've been able to do a lot of really good work around pooling our federal CARES Act money to deliver a whole series of important local community responses. We put up a business response effort where we were able to pool money and give out dollars to local businesses. We got another round of money that was able to reinfuse that. We've been giving it out in $15,000 chunks. And I look forward to hear how those businesses that were fortunate enough to receive CARES Act grants are doing. We've assisted with, again, organized through the Whatcom Unified Command, lots of food security efforts, working with our food bank. I'm hearing some voices. There you go. Ann. It's nice to see Ann Jones. She's probably surprised to even. So yeah, just lots and lots of change requirements that we've engaged in. New requirements for how to run municipal court, changes in how we do our public meetings, which of course has been via Zoom. Just challenges galore. Of course, we closed for a long time the pool. We opened that up recently. We're also able to open up the Whatcom Museum and the library to curbside services, et cetera. I think you all know that we joined as a partner in creating a quarantine and isolation facility on Byron Street. moved the Lighthouse Mission drop-in center, as I alluded, to Bellingham High School, and then on to the current site at what's known as Base Camp. And here we are. So, been a lot of changes, of course, since May 25th. That was the day George Floyd was killed. And we've seen this national movement, and we've seen a very animated response here locally, protests and marches. And it's changed things dramatically here at the mayor's office. We're getting a lot of people who are animated with the hopes that the city of Bellingham and our community will join a national movement in making real strides in improved equity around racial justice. I've had a number of intense experiences, going back to that word intense. Some of you may have heard that they marched on the mayor's office at one point in time, and there was a large group of protesters expressing themselves who I was able to communicate with and speak to. There's another group that marched on my house, and mayors, as you probably know, mayors and police chiefs are very much in sort of the crosshairs, I would say, nationally, even though I regard myself as a progressive who's wanting to make real progress and strides and be a collaborator in the local effort. Nonetheless, many of the people who are protesting see me as a source of antagonism, and I have to recognize that dynamic and strive to engage them and build trust. I know there's a lot of anger out there and a lot of distrust, and I hope bit by bit, as we do a lot of hard work around listening and then formulating action plans to be responsive at the local level, in promoting awareness and a dialogue. I think a lot of us don't fully even appreciate what anti-racism work is. I know I've gotten a great education in the whole subject. My admission of that gets me in trouble with some groups, but in fairness, there's been this dramatically increased consciousness around those issues, and I've been engaged very much in my own education around it. So I look forward to continuing collaborations with lots of organizations and groups as it relates to that. Recently, we did our very first unveiling of our very first COVID era budget. I became mayor in the second year of a biennium, and one of the requirements by law is that I deliver a budget to the city council by October 1st, and that was on last Thursday. So it's now handed off to the council. In fact, this afternoon we have our first meeting with the city council to begin doing the hard work of budget review. This is a complicated one because we saw reductions in revenue. We predicted that 2021 is going to see about a 7% reduction in revenues, and that meant that the work that we had to do for our general fund was find a way to close a gap of about $6 million, which is challenging. But we were very orderly, I think, and responsible about the method by which we did it. We asked the department heads this summer to engage in a 5, 10, 15% reduction process and identify where they would cut at those amounts. And of course, we were hoping that the cuts wouldn't be greater than somewhere around the 5% mark, and we're at 7%. So we've been able to put forward a budget that is going to involve freezing a number of positions that were vacant, engaging in some furloughs throughout the system, capping cost of living adjustments to a degree, relying to some degree on our reserves for 21 and a bit more in 22. It was drafted very much as sort of a one-year budget, even though technically it's a 2-year. We intend to have a very robust mid-year supplemental budgeting process where we evaluate the reality of our situation. And I'm hopeful that we're going to continue to do better next year. But the intention was to go into reserves about $1.8 million this year to help us with that, closing that gap. I had the good fortune, and I credit past city councils and former Mayor Linville for handing me a city that was very healthy economically. We had in unrestricted reserves at the end of last year about $16 million. We've used about $6 million of it this year. Again, we'll use another 1.8 next. It's obviously a burn rate that is not sustainable. So next year, we're going to be looking very closely at what options we have. And again, I hope with federal stimulus assistance and hopefully a more well-organized national response to COVID and a vaccine, that we'll see ourselves emerging from this. It'll be slow, but I'm hopeful that we'll see that next year. That's just the highest level. I'm happy to answer questions that people have, if there are any.
Rotarians, if you would go ahead and unmute yourself and then ask whatever questions you have of Mr. Mayor Seth.
Mr. Mayor, can you hear me okay?
Yes, Greg, would you agree? Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I've been reading about the new stormwater proposed bills and trying to run the numbers. That's going to be pretty expensive. Can you talk about the rationalization of taxing the businesses to gain the stormwater funds?
Yeah, so that's been in the paper in the last week or so. There's an effort afoot to update our stormwater comprehensive plan, and rates are established. One of the observations we made in the update, and it's based on impervious surface, and one of the things we observed was that the smaller impervious footprint landowners were paying more than the larger footprint landowners who are responsible for more of the runoff. And so one of the themes in the update was to try to begin the process of creating a more equitable system where the people that have greater responsibility for the runoff pay that proportionately greater amount. Very aware of the impact that is going to have, especially as it feels like a Band-Aid being ripped off. We're cognizant of the effect that that's going to have. And I know we're going to engage this fall in a robust community conversation about the best way to do that in the way that hurts the least. There'll be many opportunities for you to express yourself, and I'd urge you to do so. And it's going to be a cost shift, and how the council, working with staff, hearing from the communities affected, react to that. And what we propose is in precise form is an open question right now. But that conversation is going to be coming this fall, and I'd urge you to stay engaged on it.
Yeah.
Mayor Southwood, this is John Dunn. I have a question about the community outreach program that's being discussed in terms of responding to mental health and substance abuse crises in the community rather than necessarily having a police response to those. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. You know, in early June, I guess it was, in the time right after the George Floyd killing and the national uprising in response to it that we still see, there was, as you'll recall, very quickly that national phrase, defund police. And I think a lot of us were grappling with what was meant by it. And I think it means different things by different people. Some people, they really meant defund police by 50%. What seemed to happen rather quickly, at least in many of the groups that I work with, was that the translation of that was reallocate resources in ways that, among other things, have an increased behavioral health response. One of the things our own police department willingly observes is that they don't want to be the first responders to many of the people that have mental health crises or addiction issues, that there are some responses, not all, but some, where there could be an increased behavioral health response. And so this budget is giving a nod to that. And I think there's broad agreement amongst lots of people that we have to have a more humane response, more thoughtful response to behavioral health. And so we doubled the GRACE program, ground level response and coordinated engagement. It's basically a team of people that goes out to a number of folks in our community who are have repeated contact with emergency responders and police and people that provide resources in our community. And the object is to engage with them in ways that, and give them help and resources in ways that don't require constantly greater use of our fire and emergency response and our police response, so that they get the help and hopefully has the effect of reducing the nature of their repeated calls. And so that's what that's a nod to. This budget doubles the behavioral health response for the GRACE program. And it's one important step further along of creating just a more humane social safety net in our community. So I think it's the right move. It's the right step to take at this time.
Other questions?
Seth?
Mr. Mayor, this is Larry Halgren. I have a question about the bicycle lane program that's been taking place in Bellingham, how disruptive that is to the flow of traffic. I realize it's a safety issue for bicycles, but there's no revenue produced that I know of that comes from bicycles other than a sales tax revenue for the sale of a bike. But when you take 2 or 3 lanes of traffic and reduce it to 1 or 2 out of 4, it greatly impacts the ability to move around in the city. And then on top of that, you add angled parking in some cases, which is extremely dangerous for motorists with cars backing into the traffic lane. You comment about any of those things?
Sure. Lots of opinions on this subject. And the bike lane crowd very adamant in their position about it, and the people who express a different point of view, such as yourself, very adamant as well. What I can say sort of broadly, just as a first comment, is that Bellingham's committed And this is reflected in our comprehensive plan. We have a lot of goals and legacies that are seeking to build a more dense city, a more walkable city, a city that has more bike lanes available to it. So there's that. There's also the fact that 10 years ago, you might recall there was something, a local initiative put on the ballot called the Transportation Benefit District tax, which is up for renewal this year. And it dedicated, at that time, a chunk of money towards the WTA to maintain and increase a little bit our level of service here in the city for public bus service, but it also put a third of it towards increasing the rate at which we engage in our repaving street plan for the city. And then a third of it went to alternative transportation and bike and ped. So you referenced sale on bikes. There was also a very robust, dedicated amount of money, over $1 million a year when it first started. Now it's a bit more dedicated to alternative transportation. And it's that program, along with our comp plan that urges this, that accounts for the fact that you've seen in the last decade a dramatic increase in bike lanes. And the object is, as the city becomes more dense, that we'll have more people who are living, working, and playing in a particular region and using sidewalks and bike lanes to get around. It is a compromise. I hear what you're saying. It has the effect that it does. But that's what accounts for it. And that's where the money's coming from.
Okay, time for about one more question.
President Gary, maybe I could ask Mayor Fleetwood, thank you for joining us today. I'm curious about the planning that you as Mayor of Bellingham, or maybe mayors in general in Washington State, or otherwise, are doing about potential escalation of violence surrounding the elections, kind of no matter which candidate wins and so forth. But is there any planning and anticipation of what we might expect?
I think, well, first off, it's an open question. That's a good question. I recall so well, I was on the county council in 2004. If I get the detail wrong, Pete can correct me, but I remember so well after the 2000 Bush v. Gore campaign, when it was that close call, hanging chads and all of the above. Shortly thereafter, federal Congress passed an act to dramatically improve the safety of ballots. And there was a lot of federal money that was passed out to states, and counties were then given the individual opportunity to decide whether they wanted to go to mail-only voting. We had our own blue ribbon commissions that looked at all of this. The upshot of it was that safe voting in this country was made dramatically better. I think it was pretty good before, but dramatically better after that. So Whatcom County's had mail-in voting for 16 years now. And there's never been a single allegation about any kind of systemically organized fraud, ever, not once. The idea that there's some kind of conspiracy, don't get me going on this, but amongst 3,500 counties in the United States, with 3,500 auditors who run the local state system, you really think they're all in cahoots? No, they're proud of delivering good, safe voting. So I don't think there's going to be issues in Bellingham. I think if there are agitators who come out, we'll have to deal with that. I can't imagine that, and I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to have a conversation with our team about that because it's just 4 weeks away. What in that terrible event there is something? How are we going to deal with people that show up and are intimidating? We'll start by looking at the law and identifying what we can do. But I'm hoping that we're going to have a good, safe election locally.
Me too. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to thank Mayor Seth. A big round of Rotary applause from everybody that's still muted. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to give just a very brief COVID report before bringing this to an end. The number of positive case results has dropped since I gave you the last report. We had a maximum of 4 patients in the hospital. Today there are 2. Everybody that's been in the hospital has not required ICU level of care, and all of the ones that have left the hospital have been discharged. No one has died. But since I reported to you last, the COVID dashboard has shown an increased number of deaths. And what's most troubling about that for me is that one of them is in the age 0 to 19 and one in the 19 to 30. And I'm not aware of, or 2 of them actually, so 3 of them. And I'm not aware of any of these. I have sent a letter to the county health officer asking for an explanation. None of these were reported to the medical examiner's office. So I don't know if this is an issue with state vital records attributing deaths to our county or if they're real, and I will report back when I know more. I would remind everybody that I do not have a high confidence in the number of deaths that are being attributed in our county. Most of those deaths, when I've reviewed them, have been people with very extensive comorbidities or who were positive a long time before they eventually died of potentially other things, whose deaths are being linked to the virus by vital records. So I will try to get you more information about what's happened in terms of, particularly in terms of young people that are being attributed to having died. The dashboard continues to be the best source of available information, and it's what I continue to use. I do talk to the house manager about daily to find out how things are going at the hospital. We still have adequate hospital capacity. We have had patients throughout the week since the last report who have gotten admitted, but they're getting treated at lower levels of care and being discharged. And then I'll report back next week. Any quick questions? I can try to field a question or 2. Steve?
Gary, this is Steve Hager. Regarding the COVID virus, I noticed on the blood sheet that some things, and I can't remember now, I haven't got it in front of me, but some things that people have had, you're good after 2 or 3 weeks or a year after. How about COVID? Are you out for life, or is there a time limit?
Well, first of all, COVID is not transmissible through blood.
Okay.
So they're doing antibody testing, looking for evidence of you having had it. And it is our current belief, although it's still in the testing process, that once you develop an antibody, that antibody will provide you immunity. There have been a handful of reported cases worldwide where somebody has become, in the report, reinfected who had a positive test result. Every one of those so far have been discounted. So there's still not a single believable case, to my knowledge, of anybody who developed an antibody who subsequently became reinfected or got sick, again.
So it's okay to give blood.
You can give blood. You can give blood actually, regardless. It's one of the tests that they run. They run a great number of tests, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, lots of other things. So, and the test that they're running on the blood is antibody testing. And I think part of the reason that they're doing that is for people who are willing to give plasma, they're separating out the antibodies to form hyperimmune globulin as a potential treatment modality. So it's not that they're worried about the blood not being safe. It's that those people who have antibodies may be of great value to society if they're willing to donate plasma for the purification of their antibody.
Yeah, Gary, if I could mention, I forgot to mention that those of us who can't donate blood can still donate plasma. So everyone should be able to donate something, and the plasma is very much valued and needed as well.
Now, Steve, is the blood center taking the plasma by plasmapheresis, or do you have to go to the BioLife people to do that?
I'm sorry, I don't know that. I think, well, and I'll find that out, but you can certainly call.
I can answer that question. They want plasma at the at Puget Sound Blood Center, whatever it's called.
Yeah, there's.
Yeah, that's that's where I get my plasma.
Excellent. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.
Okay, any last questions? Well, I want to thank our mayor for his excellent program. I want to thank all the people that made today's meeting possible to you, starting, of course, with Sandy, John Harris for the video America the Beautiful, Doug Cole for the invocation. Our AV was well handled by Rick Kaiser. Welcome to our newest member, Ward. Thanks to Kathy for doing the charge, Felicity for introducing Ward. Thanks to Andy Day for introducing our program. And for anybody I forgot, thanks to you too. Look forward to seeing you all next week. Pay your fines for Minister of Fun. And if you have money for Happy Bucks, go ahead and donate it. Or if you want to wait till next week, I'll try to hope that we'll have enough time to be able to make time for it. Thanks to all of you for being Rotarians, for all you do in the community and for each other. And with that, we are adjourned.